Hi, I'm Karuna. I'm the founder and executive director for Mind Oasis. And with me today is my guest, Lacey Melguizo. Lacey, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm happy to be here with you.
Cool. So this is called Meditation Happy Hour with Karuna, Tea Talk and Truth. And we're going to hit all of the different aspects. But before we get started, what I'd like to know from you is what your day has looked like so far.
Well, I woke up early to the pitter patter of little feet and hugs and made some like a cacao drink with some collagen, which was new for me. A friend of mine gifted that to me. So I made that, went outside, listened to the birds, cuddled up with the dog and the kiddos. And then I spent some time with my husband and now I'm here.
Awesome. Wonderful. And where in the world are you?
Austin, Texas.
It's a hub. We love Austin, Texas. Very cool. So tell us just a little bit about your family, about your dog. Who do you have? Who are you keeping watch with?
So I have two children, Ari, who's 12, and Tobias, who's 9, and they're doing online schooling right now. So we've been together quite a bit, which, in most moments feels like stolen time and a gift. So I'm grateful for that. And then we've got our fur baby, Tallulah. She's a little Boston Terrier. She's as sweet as can be. And then my husband, Enrique, and he's also been working from home. So we've had a lot of really nurturing family time, which has been nice. A nice
Good.
gift of this time.
Good. And when you're not teaching meditation or mindfulness in schools, which we'll get to, or teaching about the moon cycle and how we can incorporate it in our life, what on earth else do you do?
I do lots of things. I like to read. I like to garden. I've picked up a new hobby during this time. I've been drawing birds and doing watercoloring and painting a little bit. I like photography. That's something that I like to do. I like to exercise and learn. I'm a constant student of life. I'm always learning. I'm very interested in wellness, and I like to play with my kiddos and my see my friends and dance and live life.
Very cool. So one of the things, Lacey, that is so admirable about you is your ability to take something that can sometimes feel complex. Meditation and mindfulness, though simple in some ways, right? We can choose an object like the breath to focus on and do that again and again. And when the mind wanders, we come back. So that's a pretty simple instruction. It's also a pretty simplistic way of looking at meditation. But in a sense, that's the root of a meditation practice. You take, but we all know it's more complex than that, I guess is my point, right? We struggle with our, just even arriving, we struggle with what does a meditation practice mean? Then we struggle with, well, all of these interesting things that come up in our meditation practice. And then a lot of people just walk away. And what's
Yeah.
interesting to me is that you enjoy bringing meditation and mindfulness in particular to children or to groups of children in schools, as well as their teachers. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about meditation, mindfulness, children, schools. You can take it wherever you'd like.
Okay. So yeah, that's my big passion is empowering kiddos and the adults in their lives that nurture them. And I have a background in health. I've been in the healthcare profession for over 20 years as a dental hygienist. And about 10 years ago, I realized, I started thinking that a lot of disease is caused by stress and inflammation in the body. And if there was some sort of a way to fix stress, that we could fix a lot of the, problems that we were seeing in the oral capacity that we were struggling with trying to help people heal. I took a class and it was a professor who was talking about mindfulness and meditation, specifically on what happens, how it reduces biomarkers for inflammation. And these were all the same biomarkers that are found in periodontal disease and also correlated with so many other diseases like heart disease and, certain types of cancers and there's contraindications for women birthing babies when they have periodontal disease. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff. And a light bulb went off. And I had also been doing a lot of research on the brain specifically for children's development, because I wanted to understand what was happening to my children developmentally through the brain. And I had this light bulb went off, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is the answer. And this is the way that we can help people manage their stress, by mental hygiene. And so I kind of had this shift from moving from dental hygiene to mental hygiene. And like mindfulness and meditation is so often like brushing and flossing our teeth. Like we have to do these practices to keep things healthy. And it's the same as our mind. And it kind of took this whole unscripted journey, if you will, where I was homeschooling my kids and kept on learning. And I realized, the first 0 to 10 is when the major neural networks of the brain are really forming the main highways. So the things that you learn during that time are really, really critical and important. And here I was in this situation with you and so many others where we were learning, and we were, going through this meditation teacher training, and our brain was changing, but it was so much more difficult as an adult to unlearn and relearn these things that I had never been introduced to until my adult life. And I thought, oh my gosh, if we can bring this to kids during this really, really formative time in their life, they will always have these practices to come back home to themselves, to deal with stress, to calm their body, to quiet their mind, to increase their wellness, to increase their levels of compassion and kindness, these beautiful gifts that live within us all. These are going to be naturally available because we're helping in a really disciplined but fun way to bring it to them through their school day, and through empowering teachers who also have a tremendous amount of stress on how they can use these practices not only to manage their classroom and help connect with their students, but also to nourish their own well-being. So these programs were born, and creativity hit, and I was inspired by a lot of people, and we kind of came up with some characters, and I wrote some stories about the different parts of the brain. And then we have the brain train practice. So it's just a simple 3-minute practice that they can do 3 times a day that helps wire the brain for success and well-being. Yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
it did. And it's amazing. Can you share one name of one of your characters from the brain?
Yeah. So I'll tell you all 3 if you want.
Okay, great.
We've got, so our amygdala is our fight or flight or freeze. And we call it the dragon. And we're like, everybody has dragons. Dragons come out. And if you don't tame and train your dragon, then things get burned down. It's like our anger, right? And so it normalizes things that kids really struggle with. And so there's a lot of social emotional benefit to that, because there's a lot of shame and anger when it comes out, especially for kids. They think they're bad. It's like, no, you're not bad. You're just human, and we have to tame and train our dragon. Our dragon comes out, and kids love this. So that's my favorite one, is the dragon. And then we have the wise owl, who is like our prefrontal cortex, and that's really allowing us to have executive function and, helping. I always say that the wise owl helps you to fly and create the dreams that are in your heart. And then we have the hippocampus, which is our seahorse, and that's the librarian. It's our library. It's our memory keeper. And so in a mindfulness practice, a lot of our sensory awareness, smells, taste, things like that get lodged into our hippocampus, which is responsible for memory. So we use these characters interchangeably to help teach the kids about their brain, but also through social emotional constructs, through the words that they use in the stories that relate back to them.
It's amazing. I always forget what a wonderful brainiac you are. Because I know you from this. So you're a multifaceted critter, right? You've brought so many interesting things to Mind Oasis. You took a little break over the past year, but when we first got started, you brought a wonderful series that talked about Christ and meditation. You've had things about the new moon, which is where we're going to go, and meditation. And then I've watched you with your mindfulness in the school systems around the Austin area. So there's just this, and then plus, dental hygienist, and then we've done meditation teacher training together. So I've seen you in these wonderful roles as a mom and as a photographer. But you're a total geek. It's awesome. I completely forget about that part of Lacey. So thank you for sharing that with us, and in such an accessible way. So one of my questions for you is, in the time of COVID, schools are operating a little differently. Are people able to connect with your work directly? Like, if they have children at home, can they connect with your trainings in any way, shape, or form these days?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something that I kind of was holding. I remember when COVID started and we started to quarantine, I really, you and I know about the practice of retreat and, finding refuge in moments, obviously, that there's a lot of suffering. So I really intentionally went into this kind of quarantine looking at it specifically as a retreat. And I was very mindful about my practice and holding space to say, okay, how can I best serve these schools right now? Number one, how can I best serve my family, myself, that sort of thing. So we went into kind of this cocoon space. And then I began to have more spaciousness around getting clarity of what was needed and listening to what was needed from some of the, counselors and principals and teachers that I have been working with over the last 3 years. And I just started making these videos, which were really uncomfortable for me at first because, it was just uncomfortable, but I just kind of stopped caring. And so I just started putting these videos on YouTube. So, there's free resources on YouTube where there's tiny little micro teachings, and then there's the brain train practice, and just different ways that you can bring these mindful words to life as a way to give back and to support the needs of the people who are online in an online format without being able to be there in person. So that's what I've been doing to help and support them in that way. And then we've just I'm in the process of launching my programs online and through an online self-paced course. And so that's super, super exciting to be able to offer it, in a larger capacity to many more people. And what else? I think, and I started teaching on Insight Timer too, as just giving more people more resources in a way that met them where they were at.
Yeah, and so we can put a link to your website on the videocast and the podcast, and then folks can sign up, I'm assuming, for your newsletter there. So as things come out, you will let them know. And is it unscriptedheart.com?
Yep, unscriptedheart.com. And sign up for the newsletter, and we'll definitely be sending out emails to let you know when those come available.
Awesome. So in a couple of weeks, I think it's on the 16th of October, you're going to bring an hour-long quickie workshop to Mind Oasis, and we entitled it New Moon Magic. Can you talk a little bit about the workshop, and then also talk about your work with the moon? So both.
So going back to my geekiness, and I guess it was about 6 years ago now, I was, I had a healing crisis, and it was based on stress and homeschooling and having 2 young children and trying to work and, having a photography business. It was working as a hygienist. There was a lot going on, and I kind of was trying to do it all. And I had a healing crisis, and I was diagnosed with PCOS, and they wanted to put me on medication, and I didn't really want to be put on medication. And so I just kind of started doing my own research on how I could, I worked with my doctor, so we were in communication, but I said, I really want to try to do this naturally. And so I started taking better care of myself. I started really self-caring, and I started to change up my diet. I took sugar out of my diet. I started doing more yoga, meditating, that kind of thing, to really nurture myself and my immune system. And but I did something kind of secretly, and I was in the closet about this, and I didn't really tell anyone about it, but I was fascinated. I'm super fascinated. I also have a geekiness for like spiritual, esoteric, ancient wisdom teachings and how that correlates to science, and just, I don't know, I'm just fascinated by it. And so I started learning about the moon cycle, especially for women. And a long, long, long time ago, all women would cycle at the same time. And there's this, interesting, but before we had light.
Just for the people who are listening to the podcast, I was about to take a sip of my coffee, and then Lacey said, blah, blah, blah. All women used to cycle at the same time. And I had a probably an epic look on my face and a pause in my coffee drinking, because I've never heard this before, Lace.
Yeah, I don't know if you've read The Red Tent, but it was just a thing. And I'm totally getting off topic, but I'm random, so whatever. Here I am. And I thought, man, there's something to this moon thing. Like, there is something. And so I started watching the cycles of the moon and learning. And what I also learned is that each moon cycle is very indicative of a woman's cycle. So there's 28 days in the moon cycle. There's about 28 days, 29.5 days in a woman's cycle. And that we as women in this modern society have kind of lost touch with this sacred cycling and this wisdom that we all carry within us. It's so similar to the moon. So the moon became my mindfulness anchor, if you will, for my healing journey. And so you've got this fullness of the moon, which represents this time in a woman's life where she's like, radiant and, going out there. And that's kind of like summer. And then it moves into, more of like a waning, and that's like the fall time. And then we have the new moon, which is a time of going inward. It's a time of planting seeds and, really nurturing this inwardness. And then you start to come back out, which is spring. And so I was kind of playing with all of these symbols, archetypes, if you will. And I healed myself. I was healed. God healed me, nature healed me, practices healed me. All of these things combined created healing in my body. And I just was like blown away by it. And so I just started planning my life with the moon, and I, my body started cycling the way that it was supposed to. And I went back to the doctor, and I no longer had PCOS, because the symptoms were gone. And so I worked with that for a while, and it was just been really interesting how that has happened. And then I got this very, very strong spiritual message that I was to do this journey, create this journey for women around the cycles of the moon. And it was really interesting because it was on the moon it was on Christmas. And for me, it represented the Christ consciousness. It represented, love. It represented healness, wholeness, these kinds of things that that sometimes we forget, that we do have this inside of us at any point in time, if we can open ourselves up and connect with our hearts and our minds. And so it just kind of happened. And I ended up walking some friends through it. And it was just transformational for everybody, One woman got pregnant, like she literally birthed a real baby. Another one birthed a business. Unscripted Heart was birthed through, this process, this kind of cycle process of empowering women to, self-care and allow their self-care to be sacred, but also this little moon magic, which is kind of fun. So anyway.
Wonderful. And so if someone signs up for your new moon magic workshop, what can they expect? Like, what are you guys going to do? What will you be up to?
So I'm going to go over just a little kind of brief overview, maybe tell my story a little bit, because I think people are always interested in like the personal story behind things. And then there's a little bit of science that will be brought in, and talking about just how the new moon is a real potent time to plant intentions, but also to commit to self-care, for 28 days. Is what we do regularly helps to change our brain and change those neural connections in our brain. So it takes about 21 days for the brain to change, but you have to show up for yourself really consistently. And so holding that space and that container to show up for yourself. There's a calendar that they'll get, a little promise that they can write to themselves to promise to hold true to their care. And then we'll meditate, and really just kind of really drop into our bodies and connect with our hearts and our dreams and our desires through this kind of feminine way of being.
Wonderful. So it really sounds like I wrote the description. So I posted the course. So I'm cracking up that I didn't catch this, and I'm going to make a little tweak. But so it really sounds like, in a sense, this is a designed using the moon cycle to bring something to life over the next month, starting on the 15th or so, the 16th or so. And so for those of us who have something percolating, like a new book, or like working with an emotion that's coming up strongly, or something like that, this could be a wonderful like little line in the sand to say, okay, I'm going to try for the next 28 days to really invoke this thing into my life, or let go of this thing that's holding me back in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And the new moon, I've done this course several different ways, but I've found, and I've gotten really clarity, that the new moon is this potent time to plant these intentions. And then the course starts on the full moon, and it's organized in a way that really becomes a mind, body, spiritual cleanse and in an intention setting. So you're really planting seeds. So I love the moon is also very much a symbol for gardening. And so there's this time where we're planting underneath the garden, right? So there's this planting of seeds time, which is the new moon, and then there's a time where they're rooting, right? And they're starting to root, and then there's a sprout, and then there's a bloom, and then there's composting. So it's that kind of garden metaphor too of how we can work with the things that are coming up in our lives and have a sense of acceptance for all of those stages, because I think that we tend to just want the bloom without the compost, or we don't take the time to plant the seeds or to nourish the soil. And so using kind of the moon cycle, I would say it's like a buffet for like self-care. And you can pick and choose which flavor and texture that you like, because there's stuff for the science geek, there's stuff for the heart, there's stuff for the body, there's stuff for the health and wellness. And so there's that spiritual aspect too that I love. So yeah.
And then Lacey, on my podcast, I always ask guests their final question, the same question of everyone. So I just want to make sure we got through talk for sure. We got through, I have coffee, you have water. We'll use that as our metaphorical tea. So now we just have to get to truth. So what is your truth?
That is an interesting question. What is my truth? I think the first thing that comes up is love. Love is my truth. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about doing these courses and sharing these practices with people, because when we can calm our bodies and calm our nervous systems and quiet our mind, what happens is that we are so connected to our hearts and to the love that we all are, and the love that breathes in and through us. And love is compassion, love is kindness, love is gentleness, love is faithfulness, love is justice, love is mercy, love is all these different, things. And I just love when people get to connect to that. And I think that's the beauty of Unscripted Heart, is that especially as adults, we have these scripts running through our heads. We have these neural wirings. And sometimes that keeps us from living from this unscripted heartedness, this ability to live from a place of love instead of fear or stress, or, that it's like more this authentic empowerment of love that connects us all. And so that is my truth. And I love being able to empower other people and seeing other people use these systems to get in touch with their truth so that they can shine, because I do believe that everyone has an innate gift, and that is within them. And if we were all connected to that and we all were able to let that shine and we had tools and resources and support to be able to do this, I think that so much of the world would be a kinder place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. One of the things that we're really talking a lot about on Mind Oasis right now is it points back to two things that you brought up. We're talking a lot about kindness, and we will be through the end of the year, largely because when I look out into the world, I see a lot of kindness, but I see a lot of unkindness too. And whether it's more or less, there's the debate, like, has it always been this way? Are people just paying attention? Is it just a little bit on loudspeaker? I don't think that's the point. You talked about how children 0 to 10 are developing the main highways, right? And what I feel is similar to you. I wasn't raised in a meditation environment or mindfulness environment. I had to find that much later on. And like most people, I came to it through yoga. But I think that when we encourage people to be kind, they actually don't know how. I don't think most of it, though that might be innately who we are love. I agree with that. And I believe that that's our inner true nature, actually. We have a lot of stories covering all of that up. And so when we say to someone, if you could just be 10% kinder, the world would look different. Well, how do you do that when it's a very ingrained process to react when any part of you is threatened? Yeah. And so it's interesting to me how meditation and mindfulness interplay and allow us as humans the space to tap into something other than reaction, which to me is the access point towards kindness. And it's not easy, and that's why it's called a practice. Yep. So that's one thing that you touched on about the 0 to 10. Much like if you ask me a multiplication, as long as it's between 0 and 12, I can probably do it off the top of my head. Why? Because I think in second grade or third, I can't remember which one, I learned those tables frontwards and backwards. Yep. Meditation and mindfulness could very much be the same thing. But we here at Mind Oasis, most of us who are here didn't have that training young. And so we're trying to figure it out at the age of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, right? So that's one thing. The other thing about kindfulness that you touched on is that it can have a ripple effect.
It does have a ripple effect.
You betcha, baby. And so one of the other things that I've been really thinking about as a small startup organization is at some point, in the mid 1700s, there were a bunch of guys over in England who said, we don't like the system of England at that time, and we're going to go to the not United States yet, and we're going to steal a whole bunch of land and do terrible things. That's not the point of this particular story. But there were just a handful of people who had a dream. Yeah. And to me, I think sometimes dreamers get a bad rap, like, well, it's always been this way. But to me, there's just this possibility of revolution. There is the real possibility of, particularly in this time, of creating a kindness revolution. And that's really what we're up to at Mind Oasis, increasingly vocal about it being so. You can get calm and peaceful from from meditation, but that's, to us, not the point. The point is actually to go out and be a more kindful person. So it makes my heart feel really happy that your truth recognizes the power of love, which of course can be expressed through kindness.
And you brought up revolution. And if you look at that word, there's love spelled backwards in that word. And in order for us to have a revolution, and I'm one of those people that do envision a bold new way of changing systems based on kindfulness and love and all these, I like that word, kindfulness. That's awesome. But in order to have a revolution, we have to go back and learn to love here and embrace every part of our humanness, the reactions, the the shame, the guilt, the grief, the hard stuff, right, as adults, and learn how to find that sense of peacefulness within us so that we can have that here, and then we can move in and through the world in a way that is more kindful. And I think that's how revolution starts.
Absolutely. And I love it. I love it. And so I'm just going to wrap back around to your workshop, because I actually think that also sometimes people think, oh, it's a workshop. Well, this is a workshop to plant an intention during a particularly potent time, both astrologically, but also, if that's not your thing, during this time of change in our systems here in the United States and in the world. And so, again, it's on, your workshop is New Moon Magic. It's on October 16th. You can find it at mindoasis.org. You look under the tab that says Learn and go to Workshops and Series, and you'll see Lacey's beautiful face. Lacey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.